Give it a second. We're going to do live in a minute. Oops. All right, we're going crazy here. We're having a little technical difficulties. Bear with me, everyone. Hide this one. There we go. All right. So welcome back to a live edition of Rise of the Savage Intellectual. Just to let everybody know right now, you're not seeing a video. This is an old friend of mine I've known for a long time. His name is Gedaliah Blum. Some of you, if you remember his OG days in New Jersey as Ken. We attended Rowan University together a while ago. I'm going to let Ken give his introduction and background, but we're streaming, Ken's streaming live from Israel. He's on his way driving in a car. It's been very hard to get a hold of him. I'm very excited for him to talk about his story and what he's doing and why he's so busy. But unfortunately for this quick 30-minute, maybe 45-minute take we have him for, we won't have much video as, like I said, he's driving to Tel Aviv right now. So without further ado, considering all the climate of politics, given the climate of what's going on in the Middle East, and given this deadline that was done on Saturday, I was so excited to get Ken on this. So shout out to Jason. Jason Schleider is usually like a co-host with me on this. Ken or Gedaliah knows Jason. Jason's going to sit this one out. He's for those of you in the Boston area, I've got an amazing professor, teacher. Jason's out there. He's looking at some jobs so he can be closer to his daughter. So sometimes when you job search in the political climate, it's better not to be on the controversial possible episodes, so to speak. So shout out to being a good dad, taking care of his daughter and up there in Massachusetts. So for those of us here tuning in, and I know Jay is at home, Gedaliah, please introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your background, give us first your background and how you ended up in Israel, because you were originally a New Jerseyan, and then let's get into what you're doing now.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me. Finally, we get to have our conversation with an audience. Usually we have it private on the phone, and we could go on for hours. So it's a pleasure to be here with you and your audience. Oh, wow. I'll just tell you right now, I'm driving in Samaria right now, which a lot of people might call the West Bank. And I'm driving between the ancient capital of Shiloh and the modern capital of Ariel. And I think that you've been to both places. For those who don't know, a lot of people think that the West Bank is called the West Bank, but it was actually renamed the West Bank in order to erase the Jewish people's connection to this land. The biblical name is Judea and Samaria, and Shiloh is actually the first Jewish capital in the land of Israel that was pretty much established by Joshua, who walked shoulder to shoulder with Moses about 1.9 million days ago. So a lot of people think that Jews here are occupying, where what we're doing is we're reestablishing ourselves in our ancestral homeland. And have a pleasure, and you've seen the hills around here, John. I know you came here for a visit, and it's there's no other words to say, but it's biblical being here.
Let me.
Wow, my story.
Yeah. If I throw it out there, so for those of you that have watched some snippets, I've always made these references to Israel or my trip, or I've even met. I've often referred to you as really one of my spiritual advisors in a way that I've always felt more connected to divinity. I've always felt more connected to God through my conversations with you. The amazing thing, and I want to touch upon that when there's a lot in the media about Jews being, the Zionists and the Jews and the colonization and taking over. Never in my life has Gedaliah ever tried to convince me or change my view of God. Never has he once put me down. Never once has he tried to make me convert. And I was in a very dark place when I went to Israel, invited out. And Ken figured this out a year before my personal implosion and said to me, reach out to me. We haven't spoken in a decade. Reach out to me on Facebook. I don't know if you remember this. And you said, hey, man, I just got to sense something's not right with you. Something's not, and I just brushed it off because I was dealing with so much. And within a year of that, my entire life fell apart. And I was on a plane flying to Israel with no return date. And I went out there for almost a month. And Ken and his beautiful wife and beautiful family and his amazing children put me up. And every morning he'd kick me out and I'd go walk through the desert. I'd do Tai Chi and I'd come back and we'd have these amazing in-depth conversations. And never once did he ever try to sway me. I went to Shabbat dinners with 50 some people and never once did anyone try to sway me. No one tried to talk down upon me because at my journey through Israel was like, I'm lost. I don't feel connected to God. But being a history major, I felt this huge connection to Israel as this birthplace of so many things. So I eventually end up there. So that's why I've always referred to you as like one of my spiritual advisors, because you were able to make me face my own bullshit, help me work through it without judgment, and never once, I never felt pressured religiously. So, I would love, so that's where that comes from. Ken had a massive effect of my life. And then I came back and I had a series of years of a lot of success. So Ken and I met at university, Rowan University. We lived like apartments, we were in a big apartment complex and we were somehow attached together. Ken goes on, I don't want to interrupt your pick up, but Ken goes on his birthright. And then a lot of crazy magical things happen, right? Like you meet somebody special on your birthday.
To make a long story short, I was back in 1999. A bunch of very wealthy Jews thought it would be really important for Jews to be more connected to Israel. So they started putting out a lot of money, sending young college students to Israel for free for 10 days. So I was actually chosen as one of the first to go. And I remember when I was on the phone with these with the people who are interviewing me to see if I could go or not, if I was going to be chosen, they said, why do you want to? They said, we have tens of thousands of people that we're calling. We have one question to ask you. Why do you want to come to Israel? And to make a long story short, I said, listen, the only people who've ever been to Israel in my whole family in 2,000 years since the exile was my grandmother and my aunt, and they went 2 years before my grandmother had passed away. So as I got older, I asked my aunt, how was the trip for grandma? And she said it changed her life. So I'm telling this woman on the phone, I said, listen, I know I'm going to go to Israel at some point in time or not. It's either going to be now with you or it's going to be 2 years before I die. I also know it's going to change my life. And so better now than later. And the woman she was crying on the phone. I'm like, does that mean I have a spot? She's like, you have a spot. And it was true. I mean, I was selling myself. I made it a little bit, I was trying to, convince her to choose me, but it's true. I mean, I came to Israel for the first time and I felt like a fish in water. I mean, the Jewish people have a homeland. A lot of people, we grew up in America, it's a melting pot and everybody's from Italy, you're from Ireland, this, that, but like it's more of a heritage. It's a birthright. It's a spiritual connection to the land that you cannot explain. You just can't explain in words. And I know so many people that experience something that they've never experienced before as a Jew coming to Israel. And from there, I just decided, that I have an eternal connection to the land. 2 years later, I came back and I met my wife. And from there, I decided to move to Israel permanently. I was 23 years old. I wasn't married, nothing. Got married a year later, and 20 years later, we're living in the hills of Binyamin, the ancient hills, and with eight beautiful kids.
Good Lord, I know you. I have to say, when I got to Israel, there is this very odd. So speaking from someone who's not Jewish and I have no Jewish heritage, I'm mostly British. My last name is on the Mayflower Compact. Like I'm very white European British. I felt an amazing amount of like, man, I'm kind of at home. like what felt weird to me was this place from outside that's so war torn and so embattled throughout all the millennia, or all the thousands of years, felt peaceful when I got. You're right, like you, and maybe that's what you felt, but it extended.
When we drove, do you remember when I picked you up from the airport? And that was I hadn't seen you in like I don't know how many years.
Yeah,
and we drove about an hour to where my neighborhood is on top of a hill. We're about an hour from the coastline. Yet on the hills on a clear day, you could actually see the ships in the sea, and you could just imagine the rolling hills in the distance. And we stopped at the side of the road. You got out, and you just lost it. You remember that?
Yeah,
it was like this whole. It's like this whole emotional, like powder keg just blew up, and I was just. It was a really beautiful moment. Because you were under a lot of pressure. People are under a lot of pressure every single day, and we don't usually have this kind of spiritual or emotional outage, and which is not. I'm not talking about going to a therapist and things like that. I'm just talking about just being in a place that is like you're awestruck, and you just have this emotional release. And that was that for you. It seemed to me, from my point of view.
It felt like. So when I got there, I was in a tremendous amount of personal chaos. I was years removed from my divorce, but not handling it well. A couple work projects inexplicably like blew up in my face, like projects that on paper were so airtight. And then the strangest things happened. So many like negative things. It just felt like swimming in chaos. And when I got there and we pulled on the side of the road and you're like, here, take a look. It redefined the word beauty for me. Looking at the hills of Israel, redefined beauty. And then I felt this immense amount of pressure being relieved. And it just felt like, hey, while you're here, you're going to be okay. Like I don't know how to explain it any other way, but like, and I felt like you, who I hadn't seen in almost 2 decades, felt like I had just seen you last week. It was this weird warp, right? It was this weird warping of time. That the only thing, so if you're a non-believer, atheist, if you believe a lot of religious stuff is BS, I would challenge you just to go drive around in Israel and then just try to quiet your mind and look around and you tell me there's not something bigger at play. Because it's like, again, it's still mountains. I've seen mountains in Colorado. It's still hills. I've seen hills in other places. But there's this immense amount of emotion that comes through you when you're looking at it that you realize you're in someplace just very different than anywhere else.
It's biblical. I mean, the land that I live in, that you opened, that you were doing Tai Chi, whatever it is on your hikes, that's where 80% of the Bible took place. I mean, this is not. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember you said to me, you were like, you knew how, like, you knew everything in here was going crazy. And I felt, without getting into my personal stuff, you really honed in on that. And I remember you said to me, because I'm not very biblical. I very rarely have read the Bible. Most of the time I've read either the first, the Old or New Testament has to do more with my history degree, right? Like more of like, to me, the Bible was more of like an abstract historical reference material that I would use along with other things to recreate history in my studies, right? I never looked at it as this moral compass or this true story or anything like that.
Yeah.
Right. So for me,
but you know what? But hold on a second. But the Bible, though, the Bible is the foundation of Western civilization. I mean, so even if you didn't study it, you kind of lived it, And so
what I meant is that I studied it more as like you would study your history book versus you know how like you would really read your history book 17 times over to see what was really George Washington, like what was he really going through. No, it's just like, okay, boom, next paper, the next article of history, right? So for me, I knew the historical importance of the land, but when you say biblical, what was blowing my mind was you said to me, because of what you're going through, I'm going to send you out to where King David, after his exile, and he wrote something. I probably should study this better, but I remember that's where
he wrote the book of Psalms there in the desert.
Like, this is where and this is crazy, but this is what Gedaliah said to me. He's like, this is where I'm going to send you today, and this is where King David went. And I'm like, I don't even know who that is. But that's how powerful it was. And then, I kind of learned, I should learn some more, but the reality was, I wasn't tied to it. But then when I walked that land and I did every day I would do my walks, I didn't need to know the story to feel the power. That's kind of what I try to explain to people is like, you don't have to be religious and you don't have to be a believer. Just go there and you tell me if you go there and you don't feel anything. Okay.
Yeah. That's right? Even, by the way, that same intensity also is compounded and even multiplied by the political situation where, I'm driving on the same roads as Arabs under the Palestinian Authority. I'm driving on the same roads right now, and not as we speak right now, but in about 2 seconds, as some of the Hamas terrorists that were released from prison in exchange for the hostages. I mean, there's an intensity here that's not just biblical, but it's you know what it's like? It's like it makes you want to love the land even more. It's like when someone's trying to come and eat your sandwich, It's like if it's a bologna sandwich with mustard and that's it, it was like a mediocre sandwich. If somebody else is trying to get it, it's like gold to you, And so, Of course, this land is gold anyway to us. And with the conflict or not, we would still be here. But it makes the intensity much, much greater, which is a very, very strange and peculiar dichotomy that you have this love and connection at the same time. I'm driving around with a 9mm Glock handgun on my belt.
Well, if you remember, and that's the other thing I say to people. So I have and as you know, I have a very diverse group of friends and associates. I have people that are not, let's just say, on the side of Israel. They feel that there's some claim to Palestine. And that's something I want to get into, because one of the things when I kind of first started this podcast, the idea was not so much to make it all about health and fitness, but I always felt, like you said in the beginning, we've had such amazing conversations off camera and just as you helping me, that I was always like, man, if somebody from the polar opposite side, if they could sit with Gedaliah and listen to his points, I really think there's a lot of bridging of these gaps. Because I'll give you a very quick one. I had a private conversation with somebody that we know, and he seemed to be a little bit more on the Palestine side, like, oh, well, the Jews are coming in and they're kicking the Palestinians. And I said, well, let me just take a middle ground and look at this analytical, which is, what is the basis for this right in Palestine? And he said, well, because they were there and then the Jews are, coming in there and taking them. I said, okay, so the right for Palestine is based on the historical perspective that they were there, before the Jews. And he was like, yeah. And I said, well, you got a problem with that. You've now limited the scope of your data to define a false positive. Because if the premise of your argument is time, who was there first, you've got to go back to the beginning of time. Right. And then that's where you start to see the beginning of the Israel/Palestine argument that, well, if we're going to argue who was there first, you go back thousands of years, we were there first. And we had multiple groups that came in and ran us out of our homeland that not one of you ever stood up for us for. So, yeah, I'm sorry it took us a couple thousand years to get back to our homeland, but there was no UN, there was no BS, DEI. There's nobody out there trying to help us get our homeland back for thousands of years. We did it ourselves.
Listen, that's not even so accurate. I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
When people want to have, I can make a simple argument. First and foremost, I don't believe in a zero-sum game, okay? I don't believe just because it's a Jewish state that Arabs can't live in the Jewish state. I think that's a Jewish state.
Let me pause you there. That's something people need to earmark, because that is the thing that I bring up to people that are pro-Palestinian. Like, the Jews will say we can do both. It's the Palestinians saying they won't. And if for Americans that are a third party, how do you not recognize that's a red flag, right? Like, that's a great point you bring up that I think sometimes people don't really listen to is Jews in Israel don't believe in a zero-sum game. They don't believe that. And I'm going to go off tangent here and I'll let you grab it back. But it's my argument with the Iron Dome. It's my argument. Like, if the Jews wanted to do genocide, Gaza would not exist. We would not hear any Palestinians. They would be wiped off the face of the map. I think the military might, the intelligence, the technology. But you explained this to me. You explained to me the Jewish philosophy, why you won't do that. And it's amazing to me that the people on the outside don't recognize that huge point you made. You're willing to do that. The other side's like, no, all Jews must die. It's like, whoa. Like, how do we not
Yeah,
see
but
that?
it's not. But it's not even in theory. I mean, 20% of all Israelis are Arab. Okay,
Oh,
zero. There are more Arabs in Israel, living in Israel, than all Jews combined in all the Arab countries. Okay,
which would
that's
then
ethnic.
which would then
That's
by
ethnic
definition
cleansing.
mean you can't be a colonizer.
Well, no. Okay, let's talk about colonization.
Yeah.
Colonization is outsiders coming in and taking over and whatever, colonizing. And it's very simple. Anybody who knows basic geography will look at a map and they say, "Oh, look, there's Arabia. That's where Arabs are from, and there's Judea, and that's where Jews are from." And the
Mhm.
fact is that they don't call it Judea anymore because, of course, it shows the connection with the Jews because that's where Jews come from, Judea. Instead, they call it the West Bank. A West Bank of what? Where's the East Bank? What is it? It's this made up. It's this made up fairy tale that the Jews not only were never from there, but we listen before the 1940, before the War of Independence, before Jordan, by the way, before Jordan occupied Israel in the quote unquote West Bank, they occupied it. So there was first of all, there was no Palestine before. There was never a Palestinian state, even before 1964. And I would actually challenge anybody of your listeners or anybody who is pro-Palestine to say that they Palestinians are historical figures in the land. I want them to name one person who self-identified as a Palestinian Arab prior to 1964. They will never find one. It doesn't exist. Not
Yeah,
one.
I do feel the historical data flies very much in the face. And you know me, I love to just have debates. I have one or two good friends that one of them I really respect a lot, a military guy. I know by some of his postings, he's very much anti-Israel in somewhat of a way, which is alarming to me because he's such an intelligent guy. And I look at what you just said, and that's where like my logical brain, like if anything, I could be accused of lacking empathy and sympathy because my brain goes to the logic side too much. However, I think in this case, it helps me get all the chatter out. Like, oh, killing the baby. Well, stop. Like, it's war. People die in war. And every country that's existing right now is only existing because they went through a war. And like I said to this one gentleman, I said, isn't it nice for you to sit up and judge the Jews while you just fucking eradicated the entire Native Americans in America? So before any American wants to stand up and say, this is like my argument that no one's been able to get around. Before you want to argue to free Palestine, are you going to give up your property back to the Native Americans? Do you want to give this country back to the Native Americans? Because if you're willing to give up,
yeah, but the Jews are the Native Americans in that example. It doesn't make sense.
Well again, this is a logical argument. Where I say, no. You logically make sense. The Jews would be the natives, but there's even an argument that Native Americans aren't native, that they came from the Bering Strait. They're native to Asia. They came from
okay, everybody came from somewhere. Also, Abraham didn't come from Israel. Abraham came into Israel from I don't even know where's like Saudi Arabia today, or I don't even know, maybe like a Kurdistan. What's Kurdistan today? That's where he came from. So listen, everybody, we all came. I believe we all came from two people. So of course we're all family. We're all brothers and sisters. The problem is though is like this: when Islam dictates that a certain people need to dominate throughout the whole world and bring Islam to the rest of the world, I have a problem with that. And of course, not all Muslims are like that, but only 10% are, which is about 500 million people in the world. So you're talking about a population of greater than the United States believes in Islamism. And I mean Islamism, not Islam, not being a Muslim, but Islamism, which is the political side of Islam. And you see this in Europe. You see this in the United States now. You see that they are looking to bring Sharia to the table through democratic channels, and they're looking to uproot Western civilization. And by the way, this is what exactly the root cause is of the Arab-Israeli conflict. And I'll give you a quick synopsis, real quick, for your listeners, is that The Jewish people received the Bible on Mount Sinai. When they received the Bible on Mount Sinai thousands of years ago, it became a new world order. It became a world order with a value system that looked at kings and those who swept his walkway as equal in the eyes of God. That upended, that completely disrupted the power structures that existed back then. Okay? Now, these power structures, they didn't go away. They still exist today. This is why very clearly you see who's against Israel: the communists, the Islamists, the wokeism, the socialism, the Marxism, all these isms that are against Western culture, Western Christian, Judean-Christian values. These Judean-Christian values is what were received on Mount Sinai, which the Christians adopted. And so this is why you see so many Christian countries falling for Islam. You see in Africa. I'm working a lot with African officials, and they don't know why there's a takeover right now of Islamism, especially in South Africa. And the reason is because they're going in there and they're involved in state takeovers using the democratic process in order to upend the value systems that made the Western societies great. Why is America such the strongest and most successful nation that has ever existed in the history of the world? It's because the Constitution, which was written based on biblical values about private property, freedom of speech, individual rights and liberties. These are all things that are diabolically opposing to Islam, to socialism, to communism. And so this whole idea that this conflict in Israel is a political conflict about land, it's nonsense. It's complete, utter nonsense. It's not about land. It has nothing to do with land. It has to do with what kind of world order do people want to have in this world. And I'll venture to say, anybody who believes in freedom and democracy should do whatever they can to expand the boundaries of these of freedom of free and democratic states, and contract the borders of fascist states. Anybody who lives in America who enjoys the freedoms that you have should be against the Hamas. They should be against Palestinians. Mahmoud Abbas right now is serving his 20th year in his four-year term. Hamas took over through free elections and then threw their opponents off the rooftops only before they threw all the gay people off the rooftops. And they have a society that's a fear society, that people don't have the rights for freedom, for liberty, for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and they blame Israel. They blame Israel for the hardships. Name one free and democratic Arab state. They don't exist. Yeah. And look at the lack of prosperity that they have in their nations. Look at the levels of war they have, because when you're a dictator, it's like dictatorship 101. When you're oppressing your own people, in order for you to make sure that they don't go against you, you have to create an enemy from outside. Yeah. You have to create an enemy from outside. So they constantly have to be in the cycle of war, and they blame all of the hardships of their own people on the people that they're fighting. Well, and that's the core. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because what we hear over here in America is this idea that, oh, well, it's the Zionists and they want to take over the West Bank and they're going to make it a shopping mall and it's all about the land. And I said, I don't know if I'm buying into that, because I have too much education and history to know that if it was all about the land and money, a deal would be struck. Deals aren't being struck because there's a lack of a better terminology. There's this religious undertone to it, which you just mentioned, that this is not just about land. This is about, things much deeper. And so the pattern I've noticed, I'm big on patterns, is that the same bad guy that the Muslim Palestinian state made up. Oh, it's the evil Jew. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know if the Jews are keeping your education system down. I don't know if the Jews are keeping your poverty up. I don't know if the, you know what I mean? Like, how are they involved in so much stuff when they're so little? And I find that it's oddly the same pattern the Democrats threw at really what I found to be the independents here in America, which I think for the first time stood up and voted. And they threw it at the Republicans. It was like, you did this, like Donald Trump's a fascist, and all the gays are going to be killed when he's elected. And I'm just like, okay, well, stop. This sounds again like you're associating the blame on an outside person, and instead of taking the extreme ownership and saying, hey, we're not doing things right for our own people. So instead, it's easier for us to clamp down on our people in a dictatorship, tell them what we want them to believe, and then fool the whole world that it's somebody else causing us all the problems. And I just... that psychological behavior pattern doesn't fit, because if that was the psychological behavior pattern of the Israeli government, I go back to my analogy about the Native American Indians, is if Israel wasn't quote unquote the good guy, you would have wiped out the Middle East. Like, here's what I said. And I think we even had this discussion, and this was like my thing was like, well, it's interesting because we don't have a discussion about the natives here in the United States because we wiped them out, destroyed them, killed them. Native Americans have the highest rate of infantile birth alcoholism, and I could be confusing that, but their babies are born with alcohol fetal syndrome worse. They have the worst addictions. They have horrible education. They have no voting presence in America. So if Israel was as Zionist as whatever you want to call these negative things, like not Zionism negative, but like, oh, they're expanding for power, then they would have done what the US did. They would have destroyed the fucking Palestinians. In 5 to 10 years, the world would have forgotten the Palestinians ever existed. Like we forgot the Native Americans existed. Like it boggles my mind.
Yeah, but there's a difference though. There's a difference though. Israelis have we absolutely have no desire for war and death. We want to be able to be free. We want to expand our boundaries of freedom. If people find themselves within those boundaries that are living according to the law, that any normal person would say is legit, like private property, no killing, no honor killing, no throwing bombs on the street. Like if you're a good person and you follow the law, then you should be able to stay. I need a podcast also. Bye bye. So I just went through, by the way, a checkpoint.
This was between where? I'm sorry.
Between Samaria and what people will call Israel proper. Like I just crossed the green line.
I will say this real quick. When you took me around and you were showing me like 1 or 2 factories, you were like, John, look, here's a factory where it's like Jewish owned, but half the workforce is Arab, like Muslim. Yeah. Like, look, they take lunch together. They will like, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is not what the U.S. press is telling me in the United States. You're telling me that the Jews are killing babies and killing children and
yeah, but it's bullshit. Listen. Let me just tell you something. Prior to October 7th, the same people who were slaughtered in their own beds were the same people that were driving babies, Arab babies from Gaza to Israeli hospitals to get cancer treatments. These were the same people who volunteered to make sure that the healthcare system that wasn't good enough to save these Arab babies were the ones that we would pick up and we would drive them to the hospitals and get free, by the way, free treatment. I paid for the Arab treatment, and I'm happy to pay for the Arab treatment because that's the kind of people that we are. But the people that they are is that they would actually go into the people's homes that were driving their own children to the hospitals and cut off their heads and then stick their babies in ovens. That's the type of situation we're dealing with. And this is why, by the way, I think that when it comes to the future of the situation of the region, Donald Trump's plan of relocating the Gazans from the Arab Gazans is the most just, is the most right, is the most viable solution. There's no solution where the Arabs of Gaza who voted in Hamas, who only after 4 or 5 months of the war started going against Hamas not because they were responsible for building the 500 miles of tunnels under their homes that turned everything into a war zone and everything destroyed. No, they were upset with Hamas because they were losing.
Yeah.
They were losing. There's hostages that came out that were being held hostage by a family with children.
Yeah.
And this girl came out and said, as a lefty, she's a far leftist, this girl. She was raised on a kibbutz on the border of Gaza. And she came out and she said, there's not one innocent person in Gaza. They all have to leave. She didn't say they all have to die. She didn't say bomb them until whatever it is, till kingdom come. They have to leave because we value life. They value death. And if they cannot live in the same area, if you're playing soccer with somebody who's constantly kicking you in the balls, they're not following the rules. Get them off the field. That's the situation. Israel is a side, including Gaza. Israel is the same size as New Jersey. Okay, we make up less than 0.002% population of the world. We're a statistical insignificance. The margin of error for a Chinese census is greater than the population of Israel.
Wow.
So you know what?
That puts it in perspective. Say that again. The Chinese, the error rate on the Chinese. Yeah, say that again. That was powerful. What is it? The error rate on the Chinese census is the error rate that they could be mistaken on their population is bigger than the actual population of Israel. Is that what you said? Oh crap! I hope we didn't lose him.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me? He might have lost my audio. You might have me muted. Let's see. That was powerful. Those are two things I did not realize. Israel is the size of New Jersey and comparatively, and the error rate on the Chinese population would be in excess of the actual population of Israel. That's powerful. So let me see if I can get Gedaliah back on. I'm going to send him a quick text. I know he's going through the desert area. And that's something I do want to hopefully we get Gedaliah back, and I want to talk about it because I think what a lot of people miss and what I'm saying to people is like, I don't want to hear your stance on the Middle East unless you've actually been there and spent some time with the everyday people. Because my argument's always been like, what's going on with the everyday people? And Gedaliah started getting into that. So let's see if we can get him back because I do want to talk about what's going on. Okay, we lost him. Let's see if we can get him back. So let me clean up a couple things so we don't have dead air. One of my analogies with the Native Americans that I made to somebody was twofold. One was we as Americans can't sit up on a pulpit and say, here's how you should handle things when we handled it the way we did. And again, I'm not making a moral disclaimer that the United States was right in what they did with the Native Americans. Okay, it looks like Ken's got him on. But what happened? Ah, right, we got him back. All right.
I got video.
Oh, nice, and video. Good enough. There we go. Okay, so we left off with just explaining Israel is comparatively the size of New Jersey, and the error rate, the mistake, the number of mistake counts for China, if they were an error, is actually the gross population for Israel.
No, it's greater. The margin of error is greater than the population of Israel. And by the way, as much as people are marching on the streets, as much media per capita that we have in Israel, people have to ask themselves, what is this obsession with Israel and the Jews? Because 40,000 Arabs were killed in Gaza, according to Hamas's own numbers. We know they're all lying. Probably more than half of that, if not half, are actually Hamas terrorists. Meanwhile, just a few years ago, the Assad regime killed 600,000 people of his own people. And so, but nobody went to any streets. Nobody protested. There's a saying that we Jews know all the time. We say, no Jews, no news. You know, there's an obsession. There's this crazy, sick obsession. And you know what? I'm going to say that it's actually a positive thing, because those that are obsessed with us, I believe, are a very loud minority. People who have an axe to grind, people who are going against this whole Judean Christian value, New World Order that was brought in on Mount Sinai, I think that there's a very silent majority of people who are self-censoring themselves, or they just don't feel like they have a dog in this fight. But the value systems that they believe in, they'll go to death for it. You know, I mean, how many military people are now, or, you know, how many recruits right now in the US are going to the military because Donald Trump is an America first kind of guy. And I'll tell you right now, this is going to sound crazy, but I think that Israel is an America first issue. And because, you know what, don't take my word for it. Take the Iranians' word for it. Take the Houthis when they say that Israel is the little Satan and America is the great Satan. We are both seen as the evil, as the evil in this world. By those who cut off the heads of babies, we're considered evil. And so when America and Israel are strong together, when we have economic ties, when we have friendships, when we have diplomacy, when we vote together, when we get each other's backs, when we do technological advances together to save lives. Israeli technology, everybody thinks, oh, America gives Israel $5 billion a year. It's like an open check. That's not true. They give Israel money as a partnership in cooperation. Do you know that you mentioned something about the Iron Dome that like miraculously shoots down rockets out of the sky with other rockets as they're moving? Like, it's insane. And America has this technology that we developed in conjunction with the US on military bases throughout the Middle East. And we know that it has saved countless lives. And so that's just one very small part of the America First argument. But I really think, and you're seeing this too, is that the Trump administration is saying America first, America first. We're going to kind of move back away from a lot of the foreign interference that we've been dealing with in the last 50 years plus. But you know what they're doing? They're getting closer to Israel because they know, the Trump administration knows. Marco Rubio was just here yesterday. They know that America will never have an ally in the whole world like they do with Israel. They could buy all the aircraft carriers in the world for $5 billion just to build, and then $3 billion every year just to maintain and to man and to send somebody's father out for 6 months at a time to be on this aircraft carrier. Or you could build a big Air Force base and armaments in Israel, and we're happy. We're happy to have American bases here. We're happy to have American soldiers here, American Marines who are here right now. I'll probably see some right now going out in Tel Aviv. Try doing that in Islamabad. Try doing that anywhere else in the world. American soldiers who are in a conflict zone who are going to be sitting there having a beer in civilian clothes, talking to people next to them who are in the Israeli army, talking about how amazing it is that we're both on the same team.
Yeah, I will say this. Like I said, for me, I look at patterns. That's a thing for me. That's the way my brain works. And I look at this pattern of, okay, let's, like for instance, it's been driving me nuts in America here where we see these very minor groups. I don't want to say minority. I want to say minor groups that are completely at odds with the morals and the principles of the religion of Hamas, but then are running around saying free Palestine. And I've always laughed because those of us, like, I don't go hardcore right. I've always been a very independent person. I've always been in that, like, you've known me since college. I've never really had a place I fit in. I was always kind of a little independent, had friends from all different walks. But I look at it like, look at the pattern of what people are doing. Like, could you go to Palestine? Let's say the Jews were kicked out of Israel, Palestine and Hamas take over. How many gay people can go there and run around and drag? You'd be shot in the fucking head before you got 5 feet.
You know what? That's an argument. That's an argument that I was confused about for a while too, but it really makes sense. It does make sense while LGBT people are for Palestine, and I'll tell you why. It goes back to the concept of these Judean-Christian values, the value systems that the Jewish people brought into this world. Okay, Now, by bringing this into the world, it's keeping the LGBT people on the fringes, because according to Judean Christian values, LGBT, gay, whatever it is, it's on the fringe of society. It's not normalized. So in order for them to be normalized in society, they need to upend this value system. It doesn't work. There's a zero-sum game there, right? There is a zero-sum game.
So I agree with that.
So with that being said, let me just finish this point. With that being said, this is why the LGBT aligns itself with the enemies of Israel, with the enemies of Western civilization. It's not that they really believe that they're, like Bibi Netanyahu said in Congress. He said it's like LGBT for Palestine is like it's like chickens for KFC. And yes, it's crazy, but at the end of the day, they're willing to go against common sense in order to make sure that they align themselves with the enemies that are putting them on the fringe.
So I have two comments on that. One is I don't think so. So here's what I've noticed. So because I have like I said, I have a diverse group. I have close friends that are gay, and the friends that I have that are gay are pro-Trump, and they're actually what I've seen in the small group of gay friends I have. There's now been this weird split between lesbians and gays, and then what they call the transgender plus. And what they've said is that, and there's this one really popular social media person. She's female, she's Jewish, she's gay, and she's a hardcore Israel supporter. And it's
what's her name?
It's called Magay, M-A-G-A.
Oh, yeah, I know her. I'm friends with her.
Are you? Okay, yeah. So my friend Stephanie is openly gay, and she's very much a supporter of more conservative values. Like she's like, I like the way America is because I have.
By the way, let me just make a point to your listeners that I'm friends with this gay person. So let's just be clear that like there's some sort of like normalcy in this world where like even though I may not agree with the value system, like I'm not gonna attack. I'll accept a person. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's a great point to make because I always bring this point up. When you listen to Ben Shapiro, right? Obviously Jewish, obviously strong Israel supporter, right? Somebody tried to trap Ben Shapiro, and I love the way he talks. If you want to just take all the politics, religion away, just look at the way this guy crafts his semantical structures and arguments. I think he's beautiful. Like it's hard. So many people try to get him in an aha moment, and they try to give him this thing like, well, I'm gay. Do you think I'm sinning? And I thought Shapiro had this beautiful answer where he's like, it doesn't matter what I think. Like, I'm not going to go in your home and mess with you. You stay out of my home, right? Let me worship God. And if you're a good person.
Yeah, listen, as God, listen, as a Jew, every single year, we pray on Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and Yom Kippur. We pray to God, who's the judge, the ultimate judge. I'm not here on this world to judge anybody. All I'm here in this world to do is to build a life for myself, my family, my country, and my people in the world. Jews do not. Why do people know so many Jews? We're like, again, this statistical insignificance. It's because we are not made to live in a silo. We are made to affect the world. We're made to connect and to make the world a better place. As corny as that sounds, that is actually intrinsic in our DNA from the beginning, from Abraham. Abraham was meant to go out. He was sent out by God to say, tell the world that there's one God and that idol worshiping is nonsense. And that you need to pray to one God. Anyway, so that's the whole idea. This whole like startup nation, all our technology, all of our innovation, it doesn't stay in Israel. It's created to go out into the world. And so we as Jews are not judges. We have our job. We have an obligation. We have our Jewish law, which are obligations. We have obligations. It's crazy. most people don't have obligations. We have obligations. If somebody finds a wallet on the street, right? Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. No, according to the Bible, according to our Jewish law, we not only have an obligation to pick it up, we have an obligation to return it. And even if it means that we have to spend money and energy and time to find the owner of the wallet, we have to return it. And we don't take expenses. I mean, so we have these are obligations we have. And so, you know, the whole idea about me believing in a certain value system and being in the same room as people who are not living in that space, I'm not their judge. And I'll accept them. I'll love them. It's all good. I don't have to agree with them. But you know what? And I know we may live in a time where if you don't agree with somebody, you're supposed to hate them, right? You're not allowed to talk to them anymore. You have to.
I feel like that's what the American left did to us for the last 4 years. Like, I'm not allowed to disagree with you. If I disagree with you and I bring up any evidence to disagree with you, or even want to have a conversation to disagree with you, I am a hater, racist. You know what I mean? Like, and here's that value system. I wrote this down, and I think this is an issue when we look at the psychology of nations, is what I would say, or the people, is that, remember, I want to go back to what you said because it ties into this non-judgment idea. When the Jews are looking at what you want to do, like, look at what, just if you're listening, listen to what Ken said. Like, we want to raise our children, worship our God, be in peace, and make the world a better place. Well, that doesn't sound too bad to me. And you say it is, and I would argue, like, look at the way Ben Shapiro reacts to the question, that he stands within his religion saying, listen, under my religion, under my God, you shouldn't be gay. However, also under my religion, my God, like, peace be with you, love you. If you're not going to live an evil life and you're going to do what you do in there and not hurt people, then I'm not going to judge you. That's God's job. If you were to take that same question, you put it to any Muslim leader, they will tell you, no, they're either gays don't exist or they must die. So it blows my mind that the left has been running this wedge in the American population that if I disagree with you, I automatically have to be evil. And if you are some type of minority representation in this country, then you are the same as a minority representation somewhere else. Like, okay, so if you're gay and Trump's going to throw all the gay people out, it's like, listen, this is where a lot of I saw the gay people in America split, which I think is important because I feel like the left, the same way we can make arguments that the justice system was kind of weaponized, I do believe society was weaponized by the left by rabble-rousing a whole bunch of small minority groups against one common enemy to make them a large group. And what they're finding out now is that since you don't have a common morality, everyone, the Elizabeth Warrens, the Harrises, you're all falling apart because finally we don't have a Republican president. That's what people don't understand. Like, I'm tired of this. Like, I wasn't a fan of Trump his first run, and there's a lot of reasons we could go into it, but his second run, he's not a Republican president. And this is what drives me crazy about the lefts in this world. He took RFK, a lifelong Democrat. He told Tulsi Gabbard, a lifelong Democrat, a woman of color. He took Elon Musk, a radical independent, one of the smartest minds on the planet, and he put them into this hodgepodge group that had no strong Republican connections. Yet he comes out and he says, listen, the independent Americans came out like they've never had. People like me could go either way. I've been a registered independent since 18. I could go blue or red. I want the best person in the position. And we all stood up and we were like, and I think this is where it ties into the gay community, is that a large amount of successful gay people were like, whoa. We don't want cross-dressers reading fucking books to kids in school. Why are you lumping us up with them? Like, I have gay friends. John, do you know what I have?
It's perverse. It's perverse. So, you know,
what you have now is the left, and this is kind of the old idea that evil eats evil. The left is now starting to eat itself. If you notice, right? Like America finally stood up and said, we don't give a shit what Hollywood says. Harris came out and she tried to pay Beyonce and all these celebrities, and we realized you celebrities are morons and we should never listen to you. Like, you're done, we're done. And it's a shame because they're actors I love. They're actors from the Marvel Cinematic Universe who played the Avengers, who are coming out just sounding like morons. Mark Ruffalo sounds like a moron. And then you turn around and you look at, okay, I was so happy about this election, not because of Trump or anything else. It was because, wow, it felt like for the first time, I felt like Americans weren't dumb enough to listen to all the celebrities, right? The Taylor Swifts and the Mark Ruffalos and all these people who are controlled by the alt-left Hollywood, who have never been truly educated, who don't know their history. You're right. It's like wow.
Tony, there was an actor that just came out and was like, I don't get it. Why do people think that people who are paid to read lines that were written for them, to move how they're told to move, to start and stop, are all of a sudden have their own original ideas, and they should be looked at as being an expert? They don't do anything for themselves. They are puppets, like literally.
Elon Musk is probably one of the 5 people in the world that could say, you know what? I don't care what you want to bribe me with. I don't care. I got more money than everyone. I don't care what you want to, what are you going to do? Like, you can't bribe me. Money doesn't interest me. What now? Like, so you have this massive independent brain that is literally, and I can see the evil side. I can see things going wrong. But at the end of the day, like, all these people rallied around Trump. Like, it's like Tulsi Gabbard, to me, was the biggest crack in the Democratic Party that should have told Democrats that you have a lying party on your hands. You lied to us about the vaccine.
Yeah.
You lied to us about the studies. You lied to us about Joe Biden saying he was competent when he wasn't. And the moment he was exposed to being incompetent, this is my biggest thing. The moment he was exposed to being incompetent, the left hung him out to dry. And you know, that tells me is like, I don't want any Democrats or leftists in the foxhole with me. I don't trust you. You're a liar. You have
it's all coming. Listen. We haven't seen anything yet. We're seeing with Doge, right? We're seeing with this Doge, they're exposing funds that went to pro-Palestinian groups that were from the what is it called? What is it called? Some agency for the environment. What is it called? The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency.
No, I didn't see this
$50 million to pro-Palestinian groups that were focusing on climate change and Palestine. $50 million of U.S. taxpayer money from the EPA. Now we're also seeing, now they're uncovering hundreds of millions of dollars that were being siphoned off of taxpayer money and being used to fill the bank accounts of the left-wing media.
Yeah. I mean, listen, when you have Zuckerberg coming out telling you straight, like, again, I'm sure Zuckerberg is a worm. He's not an Elon. He's one of those guys who's a super genius, but he's so like tightly wound. He'll never be that outward leader like Elon can be. They're just different in certain ways, but they're both these tech giants. And you saw, and I get it. I mean, he's a worm and he could be pressured, but now that there's this relief off of everyone to speak freely now, and it's not a surprise that
beyond that. No. It's beyond that. It's beyond that. It's not that they were getting political, not that there was political pressure in order for them to censor their own platform. But what I'm talking about is that U.S. taxpayer money has been found to go into the accounts of Politico, the BBC. I mean, it's insane. It's insane. And now you're realizing, oh my God, you know. You remember those old those videos that were going around with every single left-wing media pundit saying the same exact thing, and they're all speaking exactly the same words at the same time?
Yeah, that was
this is where it all come from. And you know what? And I hope to God that the people on the left wake up, and even people on the right. I'm not saying just in general. I hope people wake up and realize that we've all been living in that Jim Carrey movie. What's that movie called?
The Truman Show. The Truman Show.
The Truman Show. We've all been living everything. They're all actors. They all have scripts. They all have their and meanwhile, the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, who are making $180,000 a year, somehow are worth $250 million. Well, even Bernie.
Yeah, this is why I jumped when people were like, I was very critical of Trump, his first run, because I think that he was a letdown. From my eyes, being from New Jersey, watching him do the art of the deal, I thought his first run was going to be more like this. But with that said, I try to tell people I was very hype. I was like a Joe Rogan where I was very hyper critical of Trump. because I also expected a lot from him. But what we're seeing now, like he pulls in Tulsi. I didn't care about Trump. What I cared about was I've been arguing as a financial advisor from the late 90s about how we can't do insider trading, but every goddamn congressperson can. How is that fair in any stretch of the imagination? Because it opens you up to tremendous amounts of deceit, fraud, and being controlled. If you're only making 185 a year, but you can put 20 million in your bank account in 3 years, most humans are gonna break for that number. I don't care who you are. And this goes back to this idea that I want to bring up, that I think, so anyway, I've been arguing about that. Being a holistic coach, I've had these talks about you that I'm not, there's things I really like. I have been fighting against certain things that now 15 years later, we're like, oh, you guys weren't just hippie quacks. It does matter that there's fluoride in the water. Oops, we got that wrong. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, so to me, RFK is like, that's who I really kind of voted for, because I was like, for the first time in 20 fucking years, somebody's listening to what we were.
Well, what too? I'll tell you what too, because people maybe are wondering what is Heartland Initiative, and why am I a director? What is it? It's and I'm not going to go so far into it, but essentially it's a international public diplomacy platform. I work with a lot of officials, ministers, members of parliament here in Israel, local governors, mayors, things like this, and we work with church leaders, senators, governors in the United States as well. And I've known that, Trump didn't get into office on January 2nd or 3rd, whatever the date was. And all of a sudden he's like, okay, what are we going to do? He's been planning this for years. He knew exactly what you said. He knew himself that it was underwhelming, his performance for the first 4 years. He didn't know Washington. He didn't know the players. He trusted too many of the deep state people to kind of do what they're going to do. And, kind of like business as usual. And before, even before he was elected, he was already planning how to flip the table over. And
right, like he said that he had his own conversion team. He was like, you guys aren't going to do what you did to me last time. I'm getting my own security. You know what I mean? Like, I do think there was that ego for Trump, that he walked in and was like, oh shit, these are some real players. And they played him. And he kind of admitted that. He was like, I didn't know. Certain people on the Republican side came out like they were all for me. And then, like you said, they went back to business as usual behind the scenes, disrupting him. And remember, his first couple months was like, you're fired. And everyone's attacking Trump like, oh, you're firing everybody. But now in retrospect, we see that chaos he was dealing with, like, oh shit, I'm Trump and I'm pretty much a badass, but these guys are at a different level. They're making the world think they're dumb and quiet, but they're really running a lot. And then boom, he just ran right into that machine, right?
Yeah, but now that he's in, he seems to be in full control of everything. Like, I mean, the media can't keep up with what he's doing, and then all of a sudden he's at the NASCAR 500 or whatever it's called. He's like all over the place, and you know what? And everybody's worried about, oh, he's old. Once when the whole lie was exposed about Biden and how he was, they said, oh, he's old. Yeah, well, Trump is only a couple years younger, and you're seeing what Trump is doing, and I'll tell you what, for your listeners, Trump is a godsend to the state of Israel and the Jewish people. What we've been dealing with started with Obama, that kind of went obviously with Biden as well. I mean, it's kind of like being in a relationship and not knowing whether or not your wife is going to threaten divorce every 2 seconds you get into an argument. Now we're like, we're in bed together, like we're good, and by the way, there is a different relationship though, because we know this, and I'm coaching a lot of members of parliament about this, because they don't get the US culture. Israeli culture is very to the point. Let's just get to it, and I'm going to tell them what we need, and that's it. And I tell them, listen, you have to understand the Trump administration. This is a new America. It's an American first platform. You cannot go to the United States and say we really need X, Y, and Z, and then Trump is like, well, great. How does it benefit America? And you're like, I don't know. We're friends. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work anymore.
Well,
you have to be.
I found the Democrats wanted to make all the Americans apologists for being American and for being a superpower, that now without any like filtering or conscience, we're just going to help everybody and give everybody money. Meanwhile, like those were really good points that were brought up by Elon. Like, how the fuck did I drop Starlink so that I could get internet to everybody, but you couldn't even get FEMA out there, but you sent billions to Ukraine within, it's like none of that shit made sense anymore. And American people got sick of it. Yeah. Here's the problem. I know I'm closing it on time, and I wanted to get to two things. One is you made a comment earlier and I wrote it down, is I call it the Democratic delusion. And what I'm noticing in the Democrats, because I have a new client, seems like I'm in there a few days a week. Seems like I know that the main owner of this business is a Democrat, and he's very delusional with his, he's like, I support the military. I'm this type of guy. But then absolutely, you would never be like, you can't, it doesn't make sense to be a Democrat and support the military. It's wild to me. Again, but that's not my point. My point is this. I've noticed a lot more of my friends that used to be 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, let's say, very pro-Obama, that are now saying, yeah, I don't know if he was that good. Like, I don't know if he was that good. But here's the delusion. No one's willing to fucking come out and be like, hey, I was wrong. This is the problem with the Democratic side that I see. And now,
I think that's what people listen. Let's give people the benefit of the doubt. I think people in general don't generally want to say that they're wrong. It takes a high level of modesty, emotional intelligence,
which is what the Democratic Party pushed that they were. That's my point. The Democratic Party pushed that they were the party of tolerance and open-mindedness and acceptance, unless you disagree with them one or two. What we're talking about with this, like I'm not going to take it easy on the left, just like I never took it easy on the right when they got stupid with stuff. And I'm not going to take it easy on the left because this is the problem with our country, is that we've let people get away with being morons, and no one is accountable for that action to make it right. So what I mean is,
I'm very optimistic on that, because I think it comes from this groupthink, and I think that people are always looking around left and right. Who are my colleagues? What are they going to say on social media? What virtual signaling do I have to kind of put out there to show I'm part of the tribe? You have this cult-like community, and I'm optimistic because of a book that I once read. Well, I didn't read it. Somebody read it to me when I was like 2 years old. Everybody knows this book. It's The Emperor's New Clothes. I think we're at the point right now where Trump and Elon Musk are the kids out in the town square pointing at the king saying, he ain't got no clothes on. And everybody's kind of like right now in the midst of, well, we've been saying he's had beautiful clothes on for the last 4 years, or however many years. And so at what point could we start to, like, first of all, I'm optimistic because you're hearing a lot less from the Democrats. And I'm not talking about the pundits. I'm not talking about the leaders. I'm talking about the people on the ground. People on the ground are very quiet. Do you notice when it comes to Elon Musk and the pushback he gets, not one person is even saying he's lying? They're just saying he doesn't have a right. He doesn't have a right to do it.
That's okay. So what you find positive, I'm on the other side of the coin finding it negative because of things like that. Is that my problem with the Democrats right now? Is that they're unable to admit that they were wrong. And what's worse is they're unable to say, you know what? A large majority of Americans voted for this. So let's give it a chance and let's get behind it. That's my problem, is they're so delusional. Like, I'm hearing people like that. Like, instead of saying Elon's stupid or Elon lied, they're like, who voted him in? And so I feel like
give it time. You know what? But give it time, because I believe that two things need to occur in order to heal our culture. And I say our shared culture, because also we have the same kind of thing here, is that we need to give people space to have their come to Jesus moment, or whatever it's called, right? To kind of to be enlightened, right?
That's going to be the clip. That's the clip for the show.
Yeah. People are going to be like, "Oh man, Gedaliah, you've been working with Christians too much." No, but that one thing needs to happen, The other thing that needs to happen is those that were right should not be pointing at them and saying, "Ha, I told you so." It needs to say, "You know what? I'm wrong about a lot of things." And it takes a big person to come out and say that we need more humility. We need to stop pointing fingers. You know what? At the end of the day, it takes one alien invasion for all these people to hug each other and to be like, we're brothers and sisters. It's a luxury. It's a luxury in this world that people are able to argue over the nuance of politics. I'm not saying a lot of it isn't important. Of course, this is. It's very important. But I think it's also a luxury.
So you hit the nail on the head. It's perspective. It's if you were to draw yourself out and you were to look at a planet, we're a first world planet problems that we get to fight over the land we have because no one else is coming in to take it. It's not that much different than right? Like if you were a nation and you started getting attacked from the outside, all of a sudden the tribe, and they start coming together because you realize, wait a minute, why are we fighting over this little bit of land? We're going to lose it all if we don't stick together. Sadly, I feel like that's the negative energy in the world that we're not.
That's what RFK says on when he was being drilled. He's like when he was being confirmed. He said people who are sick only have one problem,
one dream.
You know what? And that's it. Israel right now. I'm driving through Tel Aviv, and I'm driving in traffic in an underpass, and there's big yellow ribbons and signs. There's, it's been 500 days since the hostages have been taken and put in these terrible, dungeons in Gaza. And these are our problems right now. We're not talking about the price of Big Macs. I can't believe they went up a quarter. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I wanted to go back to that because that was a big part I did want to get into. And as you and I do, I think we covered a lot of great stuff. But one of the things I've always said to people is like, I almost don't, if you're going to come to me with an opinion and you're glued, you're cemented to that opinion, I don't want to listen to it unless you've got some like on the ground experience. So like when people come to me and say, oh, Jews are this, I was like, have you been there? Because when I went to Israel, it wasn't a Jew who pulled out a 9mm and put it in my face because I was white, male American. It was a Muslim kid. Do you know what I'm saying? Like this was my first day. Oh God, I keep wanting to call him Bill Goldstein because that's the name of the guy that we went to college with. But it's Unity Warriors. Oh my God, why is his name out of my head right now?
Ben Goldstein.
Ben Goldstein. Okay. So there was a guy in Rowan called Bill Goldstein. His nickname was the Wookiee. It's just stuck in my head. So Ben picks me up from your office and decides to drive me to Israel. And now I'm on 23 hours, no sleep. Flew in from Miami to Moscow and then Moscow to Israel, Tel Aviv. So you pick me up 23 hours. I have that big moment emotionally. Then we get there and, Ben's like, hey, I'll take him to Israel right now. And we jump in the car. And I remember I have a video of this. It's on my Instagram. So we start driving down through like a ghetto, a poor area. And I could just tell the way the kids were looking at me. There was this anger and hatred in them at a young age, which is what I've heard. Like, hey, Hamas is training these kids to hate. They don't know anything. I saw that, felt that. Then on the Mount Olives, we got stuck. And I remember Ben had said, he goes, oh man, in all the 10, 20, whatever years I've been coming to Israel, I've never gone this way. Oddly, when I picked you up, my GPS brought me a whole different way. We came down the back mountain. We get stuck. And I remember, like you said, and this is a true story. You said, hey, I'm driving around with a Glock 9. I remember when I was getting ready for the plane, our mutual good friend, Dan, who was in law enforcement a long time in the States, was like, hey, John, listen, when you go out there, I know you're going through a lot of stuff in your head. Let's not get into any bar fights. It's not the US. It's not the same. It's not the same legal system. Just, chill out. And then I talk to you and you kind of give me the same little talk like, hey, just remember it's a little bit different here than it is in the States.
By the way, I have to cut you off because we remember that we were in Tel Aviv and we were in the parking lot, and there was a parking attendant.
It was the gate. It was the gate when you invited the guy to the dinner. That was, I wanted to get back to that story, but yes, go ahead. Okay. I remember that to this day. Every moment, I wanted to get out of the car and beat this guy up. Gedaliah is like, hold on a minute.
So we're driving. So we're not driving. We're waiting behind a gate for the guy to pay for his parking. And you see that the guy is having a conversation he's sitting in his car, having a conversation with the parking attendant, and he's taking a long time. And I honked or whatever. And you're like, dude, what the F, man? This guy's just taking our time. I'm like, oh, let me see what's going on. I get out of the car. I go up there, and I see that they're arguing with each other. And I go up to the guy in the car, and I'm like, you okay? Is everything okay? He's like, no, these guys are screwing me over, blah, blah, blah. I'm getting ripped off. I'm sick of being a sucker. I'm like, how much is your parking? I'll pay for it. He's like, no, I got the money. It's not the point. And then eventually he calms down, and what's going on? What's your name? And this, that. And then, I get his name. And then I go back to the car, and you're like, what were you thinking when I got back out of the car? When you were like, dude, let's just kick this guy's ass and like drive his car away so we could like go through. And I come back and
I wasn't telling you to commit auto theft, just a small assault and battery, just a small assault. Listen, for those that are watching, I was in Israel because I had a lot of issues going on in my personal life, and anger management was definitely an issue I was working on. And I was out there in Israel being very selfish and very ego driven. Like, this is my time to heal. This is my time with Ken. What the hell are you taking my time? We got to be some, and then just, so for me also, as a side note, I had this discussion on another podcast where unfortunately, the way my life goes in some ways, like, unless sometimes I'm really forceful and aggressive, I don't get things done. Like things are just, there's a whole nother topic. But anyway, I'm in that mindset. And I remember when you got out of the car, there was just these weird things that would happen to me in Israel. That's why I started becoming much more.
By the way, how many years ago? How many years ago was that?
We're coming up on 4, I think now.
All right, listen, I want to tell you something. The guy that was in the car, I'm still in touch with him. We're friends. And not only that, but since that time, I started working with officials in Washington, D.C. And his work is working in Washington, D.C. So it's so amazing. He's like opening up all these doors for me, and we have like, it's amazing. I mean, listen.
I still say we should do this.
Yeah.
No, I'll tell you,
good lesson for me too.
It's important. I think when I remember you did that, and I was about to get out of the car and be like, "Fuck this! I'm gonna smack this guy and move the car." Like I'm not dealing. Like, I'm dealing with so much shit from home. I'm not coming here and dealing with this, right? And this is the weird thing about Israel, was in that moment that I normally would have got out of the car and like yelled at both the attendant and him. Like, I wouldn't have cared. In that moment, this weird amount of peace came over me. Like, let him handle it. Let's see what he does. And I remember I realized I've been going through my own personal difficulties for the last year. Florida's been very difficult. And I've been trying to like reconnect with this amazing amount of peace I had when I came back from Israel, where nothing would bother me. Like, I would always, like, I can remember having a couple almost aggressive incidents where that moment with you in the parking garage came back to my head. And I'm like, you know what? Let me see if I can just handle this like Gedaliah would have, just to challenge myself. Like this, I don't want to do this. I want to argue with the guy. I want to yell at him. But fuck, if he could do that, I could do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I respected what you did there. I was a higher level of mental strength, emotional strength, and you were gifted something from it, right? Now you have this, because I remember like you came back and you're like, yeah, I invited him to Shabbat dinner, I paid for this. It turns out I know a cousin for this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I just watched somebody take an incident that was just so aggravating and so aggressive to me. And then all of a sudden it just flipped into this like, hey man, it's not a big deal, bro. It's all good. And that was something I could never do most of my, like, you know me, I wasn't the guy you brought in if you need someone to have a peaceful resolution. I was the guy you called because you were getting bullied, or I was the guy you called because somebody's, you know what I mean? Like, I was always in that very aggressive world. So to see you do that, I've never forgotten it. I must have told that story 100 times.
You know what? Living in Israel, you're always just 1 degree of separation from somebody else. Literally, there's like 7 connections from Kevin Bacon. Remember, we were growing up.
Yes.
It was,
Six degrees. 6 degrees of 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon. Yeah.
Yeah, 6 years ago. So here, there's only 1 degree away from anybody else, and so for here, it's different. There's no anonymity here. It's like you're connected. So the guy who's road raging in front of you is a guy that you probably would know and you might be at a wedding with. So it's like, for me, like, yeah, we're in this dysfunctional family, but at the end of the day, we're still connected. We're still family. So, for me, I really try. I don't remember I think I remember the last time I got into a fight. It was like 7th grade, and I wasn't even didn't even want to fight. I was like peer pressured into fighting somebody. And like, even when I was fighting somebody, I'm like, what am I doing? I didn't even have rage, some people go berserk when they fight. I'm like, I could have been playing chess. You know what I mean? Like, my head was like all there. I'm just not a fighter. And so, whatever.
You're not a physical fighter, but one thing I do want to, I don't know how much more time I have with you, so I do want to get to this part because I want to come back to this. You're not a fighter, but you're a warrior. I mean, what you're doing with the Heartland Initiative, and I think we kind of went through that real fast when you explained it, and I did want to leave some time for you to talk about that, because the other thing I try to do is I try to have people in my circle that I talk to that are not just looking at the world and complaining, but if they have a viewpoint, and Gedaliah has a very strong viewpoint. So whether you agree with him or not, I think we can all independently say he has a very strong viewpoint. He's very strong in his religion. He's very strong in his government. He's very strong in his mission. He's very stalwart in what he does. And I think that in that way it makes you a warrior, because you're involved in the action of change. I talked to Ken, not even, sometime it was like, maybe it was a month or two ago. And he's like, oh, we're working on water filtration systems for people in Africa that have no running water. And I'm like, that's not even close to Israel. Like, what the hell? And then I remember the Orange Pages, I think it was called, was the translation that you were working on for a while to help Israeli companies get contracts outside of Israel. I mean, Gedaliah is really in the heart of this fight. He's not just sitting from a TV screen yelling, oh, Palestine's bad. He's going into a bomb shelter in the middle of his day with his children. He's driving to Tel Aviv and that's the interesting thing. Like, he just told you he doesn't like the fight, yet he's got to drive around with a Glock 9mm because that is the way that another group of people are making it. And if you're not in that area and you're not experiencing that, I can't give you any credence to your opinion of what's going on. I don't want to hear that you were, I was in like the military. Not okay. Were you there? Did you spend a few weeks at least with both groups of people? Did you see, like, I could see facial expressions, body reactions. When I was there was 3 different attacks on Jews within a few hundred feet of me. When I, like, at all of them, I had the Muslim kid on a scooter jam our cars on the Mount Olives where he pulled out the gun. Thank God for Ben. Like, he spoke multiple languages. He pulls out his 9. We're like in an armed conflict within the first 2 hours I'm in Israel, and it had nothing to do, like, there was nothing. You know what I mean? It was Muslim youth rage against what he saw as a Jew and American. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And so I tell people, like, I don't want to hear your opinion because you watch it on TV. And if you do have a strong opinion, I get this from Jordan Peterson. Like, are you just like fucking writing cardboard signs and picketing for an hour once every 6 months? Or are you creating an entire business? And that's what.
Well, you know what? Listen. At the end of the day, it's very simple. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth to listen twice as much as we speak. If we are in a position where there's somebody who actually has real life experience that even if you don't agree with, ask them questions, like, fill yourself up, stop fighting. What are you going to win? What kind of points are you going to get? You're not going to get any points for winning an argument, but you will become more wise. You will become more smarter. You will become more experienced through other people's experiences. That's why people read books. You read books from other people's experiences. You could get that same experience from talking to people who you're completely against. Like, okay, I see an Arab. Listen, tell me what your connection is to the land. Who is your grandparents? Let me,
I know you've said you'll do this, and I'm going to say this out to everybody out there. Like, I really do feel that I'm a strong independent. I sit, I'm definitely have things that right now, based upon my experience and the people in my circle, I believe are certain truths that are there. But you said it right there, is that you can either go into a discussion with somebody of an opposing view. You can go into it with only two goals. You can either go in it to win, which is not going to make you any smarter, or you can go into it to understand, right? Like, I like to debate people, because if you can beat me, so, quote unquote, beat me in the debate, I don't look at that as a loss. I look at, oh my God, you just opened up my paradigm and now I've learned more. Like, I'm okay with losing a debate. But that's also why I debate so ferociously, is that for you to, I'm willing to change my mind. You just got to give me enough of it. And what I find is that there's not enough people, like you said, that are willing to sit down. And I feel like Jews are much more willing to sit down and let's talk about the middle ground. And I find either hardcore leftists and hardcore like pro-Palestinians don't even want to have the conversation. And my belief is, because if you had the fucking conversation, you would realize someone is right and someone is wrong. And it goes back to what we said earlier, which is it's really hard in the human condition for many people to admit that they were wrong for whatever their issues are. So I would love, when we have more time, or if there is a time in the future, I'd like to find, I lost Gedaliah and then I got him back. Oh, okay, I got him back. So what I would like to do, maybe in a future time we can set up, is I'd love to get somebody with an opposing view and kind of moderate through it, because I think the worst thing that we have going on right now in the media is people on the left running their mouths and people on the right running their mouths. And there's really nobody that's saying, okay, listen, I'm willing to bring you in and you in. And let's just let's not debate to win. Let's debate to find a middle ground, because I agree with what you said. Like, if you win, if two people come on a radio show or a podcast, pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel, and you guys have a debate, and let's say you win the guy over and slam him, make him look stupid, you've won nothing, right? Like, you've won nothing. But if we put you both on there, and after an hour, even if there's only one thing, if there's one thing, a hardcore Palestinian, hardcore Israeli, like, come together and say, you know what, here's one road that we could walk together, I think that's more powerful for the future than one pundit winning. And again, not to be the pessimist, but my belief is, watching the patterns of development, studying the religions, that one side is incapable of having that conversation, because whenever Israel or the US has, this, we're going back to the, the two, what do they call it? The two state, was it the
delusion? The two state delusion.
But like, Trump's first presidency, I flew in to Israel the day of, it was like the 100 years day or whatever it was, when Trump said, like, Trump and Israel came to the table saying, hey, we're willing to work the deal out. And the Palestinian side was like, nope, we're not even going to sit at the table. And I thought that was like, that should have been the first red flag to the whole world, that there's a right and there's a wrong here. Because if you're not willing to sit down and talk, you're not in the right. You're right.
That's why, by the way, I'm very happy to talk, but I'll tell you, at the end of the day, where you said, like, I'm not a fighter, I don't respond a lot to people. I don't have arguments with a lot of people. If people don't agree with me, or they are very insulting to me, or they call me Nate, whatever it is, I look at them and say, listen, you are distracting me. You're wasting my time. I'm here on the ground in Israel. I'm here. I'm building. I'm building a family. I'm building a community. I'm building a country. I'm working with some of the highest levels of government. We're building. I don't have time to go back and forth with you and like think that we're gonna like win a debate. I'll be happy to speak for your audience, but I'm not looking to change anybody's mind. And by the way, a lot of people say like, oh, I'm an activist. I'm really more of like an actionist. I'm not out there with posters and flags and saying, oh, support Israel, blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm doing. I'm building up the economy. I'm building up our connections with the international community. I'm finding activities to do together. We're doing business opportunities and cooperations. We're bringing Israeli technology to places in the world that is godforsaken, where UNICEF will take, millions of dollars and ship truckloads of rice to, and we could just bring food, greenhouses to them. Like, these are the things that I'm doing in order to build my community, my family, my country in the world. And so, I just want to make that a point. And I think that a lot of
there's a great point.
What's that?
here's a great point. I'm so sorry to cut you off, but there's a bit important part I picked up on. Are you doing all this in Israel, or are you doing it in other countries?
Listen, I live in Israel, but
aren't you in Africa? Aren't you sending some of this technology to other countries? Aren't you, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I've got partners in Africa. I got partners in the U.S. I have partners in Europe.
That doesn't sound to me like a greedy Jewish man who's trying to kill all the Palestinians so he could just build a powerful Jewish front. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, that's where the pattern.
In fact, this is what I do. I don't go out in order to strengthen Israel. I go out in order to strengthen Israeli friends. If our friends are stronger, then it's better for the relationship between Israel and its friends. I put other countries first. If I'm in South Africa or I'm in South Sudan, these are things I say. What do you need? South Africa right now has a state takeover of Islamists and communists taking over the country and upending the whole church. I'm working with the church leaders to helping them identify exactly how they could secure their own communities and their Bible and their churches.
Church or synagogue?
The churches. They're churches. They're Christians. Yeah, I work with a lot of Christians.
They're not Jews. Because here's where I get a little emotional. Like, show me all the Palestinian organizations that are building things in Africa. Show me the Palestinian organizations that are saying we want to make our friends strong. Show me the Palestinian organizations that are helping.
No, but that's the point, though. But that's the point. No, but that's the point. They reject everything, peace, everything, because the more they're victims, the more money they get. Yep. That's it. That's their business model. Their business model is very, very simple. If we are victims, we will get more money. That's it. It's very simple. Jews are what?
Well, see, I saw that. The thing that bothered me is I've seen some people posting things like, "Oh, well, you can't say anything bad about the Jews. You can't." I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Let's go back to Black Lives Matter. Do we all forget that summer of COVID and Black Lives Matter where you couldn't say anything wrong? And Black Lives Matter was not a charity organization. It was not a 501c3. I was called a massive racist and privileged white person because I was one of the first people to copy their entire manifesto from their website. In which case, one, they have a federal employee identification number, which means they were a for-profit organization, and two, they had anti-Israel, anti-Jewish things on their manifesto, and then they ripped it down. And then we were all screaming how Black Lives Matter. What happened next in the New York, New Jersey area, I'm not sure if you remember this, was a massive amount of Jews being physically attacked. And who were there? And I'm happy to be fact-checked, but from what I was able to pull together from the media and from what I read, a majority of those attacks were Black people attacking Jews. And I stood up and said, where's the all Jewish lives matter? Where's the BLM stepping into saying Black people, hey, we just try to get everybody on our side to stop doing racist shit? Because there's another thing that happened in between that was a bunch of attacks on Asians. And I was like, where's the yellow lives matters? Where's Andrew Yang coming out?
No. This is why. I'll tell you why. Because Jews and Asians don't make business out of being a victim. We don't.
Yeah. I agree.
You know what? We succeed as a people, as nations, because we refuse to be victims. Look at every single nation around the world who identifies themselves as a victim. How successful are they really? They're not successful. In order to be successful, you cannot self-identify as a victim. Because once you're a victim, you want a handout. And successful people don't look for handouts.
Yeah, my big thing was when you start looking at these from an objective standpoint, it just the things don't line up and make sense. Like they just don't. Where's all, like I said, where's all of these Palestinian organizations that are going overseas? Or what I thought was interesting was now Trump comes involved, and now the Jordan Dick, whatever Jordan. Was he the king of Jordan? Or I don't even know what he is right now off the top of my head. Like the Jordanian president, whatever, is now saying, okay, fine, I'll accept the children. Right? I don't know if you saw that. They were like, he wouldn't take anybody in from Gaza. Like we were talking about the children.
Yeah.
Now suddenly
look how much they love their own people. Imagine being in Gaza and
So let me ask you, and I know I'm spreading my time thin with you, but let me ask you a question, because this is something I did want to get from you, because you're there. I've always said to this point that I really do have this heartfelt feeling bad for certain, however you want to call it correctly, like Palestinian people that are in Gaza that are kind of trapped there because the only information they're given is misinformation. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't really know. They don't know 5% of the story except for what they're told. You know, they're digging tunnels under them. I've heard some people say, well, why don't the Palestinians in Gaza kick out Hamas? And I'm like, because they would just murder them all. Like, you can't stand up to these people. They just shoot you in the head. You're dead. You're done. You look at the soldiers that are in this Hamas. They're all either big. You see fat guys. You see people that aren't. You know, then you see the hostages being released, and they look horrible. They were horribly abused. I don't understand how the common sense isn't prevailing in this. And I'm hoping that, and you know, this is the crazy thing, but this is where I said, like, Trump is not the Republican president. And here's my, and I was kind of right about this a while back. I said that I predicted Bloomberg would jump in the race for the Democrats, even though he lost. I predicted Tulsi Gabbard would be a dark horse in the second election. And, you know, I didn't realize she'd flip sides, but she did. I had a lot of these weird predictions that were out of nowhere. I have an odd prediction, and I'll kind of end it on that for me, that I think what you're going to see with Trump, Elon, RFK, and Tulsi, and I'm hoping this, maybe it's also part of my subjective hope. I think you might finally see a third party emerge in America, like a truly independent middle party that breaks off from the right, you know, more associated with the right, because Trump came out and said, we're going to recognize God. We're going to recognize only two genders. We're going to recognize the family value. I think those are beautiful. I think those are things, again, I am not a married man in a home like that, but that's what I say to people. Like, I can get behind our country being more of a father, wife, family unit. All the statistics show people are better that way. There's like all these things like that, even though I don't fit into that exact mold, I think that's a better mold for the way we should look at running our country. It's more stable. I don't know why we got away from the idea that normal is such a bad word now. Like, oh, it's normalized. Like, yeah, like there's always these people on the fringe and they make major changes, but we have to stick to the normalization. So I'm hoping we might finally see the advancement of a true third independent middle party that breaks away from all the bullshit of the left, but can pull some of those, you know, like like Bill Maher is this very interesting leftist, you know, a Jewish Hollywood, almost non-practicing Jew who, with October 7th, was, I think, one of the first eye-opening points for him that his Democratic Party was not a good party, right? Like, I've never been a fan of his, but I've seen the way that he's starting to call out people on the bullshit. You know, he's not a fan of Trump. He's not a fan of Republican things. I still think he's a little wonky on things. But I'm noticing these stalwart people that are now starting to shift more into the middle. So that's my prediction. I think you might see something where, JD Vance, and he's definitely like more of that Republican guard, but I don't think any of these people are hardcore rights. So I'm hoping there comes this middle ground that comes out. No bullshit, family-based values, America first. Stop with the lies and the rhetoric. Stop with the mass media bullshit. You know, that's my hope. But I guess that's what I want to say on this. What I want to end with is kind of giving you some time to talk about where you are right now with Israel, and where you are right now with, October 7th, the repercussions culminating in what was supposed to be the demand of the release of all hostages on Saturday. Hamas delivering 3, and then we haven't heard much from anybody. Can you speak a little bit about what you're experiencing over there, or what you think might happen now that Trump is fully in bed? Oh shit! Great question. I lost him. So I wanted to go with Trump is fully embedded, and he made the comment that he'd back Israel on, like, do what you want to do. So I'm kind of interested from somebody who's very tied into Israel and the government there about what I might have to end the show on a cliffhanger, and we'll have to get Gedaliah back. All right, we'll give him a minute. We'll give him another minute, see if he jumps back on. All right. So this is what I'm gonna do a wrap up. We're about 10 minutes over time. I'm going to do a wrap up. I know Ken had to get somewhere and he might have lost reception. He's out there. So first and foremost, what I would like to say is that, the podcast is called The Rise of the Savage Intellectual. It's due to the fact that I wanted to explore very difficult conversations outside the health and fitness realm that a lot of this Instagram is about, or the Instagram account is about. The Savage Intellectual is being highly intellectual, but not allowing this room to be this wussy punk, talk out one side of your mouth, but act a different way. Like that you can't semantically be subversive in these conversations that I wanted to set up. So, and I have these very polarizing people in my group of friends. I have Gedaliah, who is not just someone in Israel, but if you listen to the podcast, is highly involved in government structures and not just trying to make, that's interesting. He's not all about Israeli pride and we're going to make Israel the dominant country and no one's going to touch us. It's like, what else can we do to make the world around us a better place? How can we strengthen our friendships so we strengthen our longevity of peace? That's a very different rhetoric than I've heard from the other side. So I want to say this out there. I do have people that are pro-Palestinian. I do have people that follow me, and there's people I've worked with that are Muslim and pro-Palestinian. And I do respect you and I respect your intelligence. My thought process with bringing Gedaliah on was to generate a little bit of some controversy and get some people watching, and then really hopefully invite somebody from an opposite viewpoint on the show to kind of have a good discussion with Gedaliah about that. But he made a great point, is that what I want to look to do is bring somebody aboard that can intellectually, I don't want you to battle. What I would like to do is find somebody from a very polar opposite of Ken, someone who's very pro-Palestinian or maybe anti-Israeli or Israel, and bring them together, because I would love to see if I can moderate a conversation, getting rid of the bullshit and finding a common road. I think that's the beginning of a lot of peace happening, is that of those of us that are just the everyday people. That are true independents, kind of caught in the middle. I have friends that are staunch Republicans or staunch Democrats. I have people that are very pro-gay. I really don't keep any in my circle that is adamant anti-gay, anti-anything. Like anti-anything is usually not in my circle. It's a little bit too much of a closed-minded position. So I just got a WhatsApp from Gedaliah. Let's see what he says. Okay, so he's got a couple voice notes for me. Let's see.
Anyway, but happy to come back if you wanna. If you thought it was good, and maybe people wanna, if people.
Okay, so if you guys could hear that, that was him just saying, he got cut off. He had to run into the building. He's in Tel Aviv doing another meeting, and he said he'd be willing to come back on. And that's what I was alluding to, is I'd love to get somebody with an opposing opinion on here to have a respectful and intellectual conversation. It will get heated. It will be a battle. It will raise some emotions. That's okay. I think the segment I named is called Trigger Points or Venn Discussions. Those are kind of the ideas I'm playing with. I really would like to find some people have these polar opposite opinions and see if I can moderate a middle road. And then, so anybody out there, if you did feel offended by the podcast, good. Hopefully it shook you up a little bit. Hopefully you got some emotion stirring. I'd love to hear about your comments. I don't really moderate the comments unless they're very hateful or anything, too bad. But I'd love, again, like I would love to be found wrong in a debate. It just opens up my mind. It allows me to know more. So those of you out there are watching, like Ken said, nobody really watches to the end, so maybe you're not there. But if you are watching this as a replay and you have some opinions, please throw them in a comment. If not, you can see us on our Instagram. thesavagecompany.fia is our Instagram. The Heartland Initiative is what Gedaliah is working on. It's a multifunctional company. Like I said, they've worked from everything from water purifiers from certain areas of Africa to working on political and localized initiatives. We'll leave it at that. He's easy to find on Twitter, X. I think it's no BDS or say no to BDS. I'll make sure I share some more of his stuff. But we're coming up on an hour and 45. So that's pretty much our time. So I want to thank anybody who listened live or anybody who's going to be listening. If you are pro one way or the other, I do want to hear from you. And if you are someone who is of an intellectual mindset, and you're having some experience in the Middle East and you are of an opposing view, I would love for you to please reach out to me and set up a respectful, we can have it heated, but respectful and intellectual debate. And maybe less of the debate. I really, like I said, my thing is to find that middle road that we can all get some commonality on and then start walking down that and then see where we can branch out in our differences. But to everybody out there, it's been a crazy wild ride since the election. I'm more than happy to come out and admit I am much more confident on the new presidency that's in there. It has less to do with Trump, has much more to do with RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. I've been a fan of Tulsi Gabbard since she was on the Democratic side. For those of you that did follow me a while back, I was at one point a very big supporter of Andrew Yang, who was running as a Democrat. I don't support him now because I think he's a coward and I think he's full of shit. No problem saying that out there. He's just someone who bent and broke. He is the complete opposite of a tech genius or an entrepreneur genius like Elon. I'm kind of glad Andrew Yang's out of the picture. He seems like a guy who just folds for anything. Tulsi Gabbard, as you can see, look at the starch differences. Everybody in the world tried to attack her and rip her down. She was a woman and a woman of color, but none of the Democrats had a problem with trying to rip her down. And if there's ever anybody some young person wants to look up to, especially a woman of color, I don't think it's Harris. I don't think you want to get your job because you slept with older men and then locked up your own kind and laughed about it on radio. To me, that's just pure disloyalty. I don't have any respect for someone like that, regardless of what their political positions were. Just you're not loyal. That's a huge thing for me. Tulsi Gabbard has combat experience. She was a medic. She has seen things that none of these politicians, especially these female Democratic politicians, have ever seen. She has been through hell and she's been through hellfire. And the thing that I respect about her is that at no point, like in Andrew Yang, did she ever have to bend her morals to get on a bus to go somewhere that was kind of en route to where he wanted to go. That's a weak spined type of personality. And that's why when you look at the people that are now going over to Trump's side, I'm a big fan of Tulsi. So Tulsi is the one who kind of made me jump on this train. RFK, again, fights for a lot of the same things as a holistic coach. I've been fighting for 10, 15 years. So as I said on the podcast, I do believe we're going to have a very interesting but an extremely positive year with what is not really a Republican presidency. This is really, I would say, the first truly independent group that we've had. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this all comes out. But again, in closing, I would say to those people that I doubt you would find this podcast, but if you happen to see it and you were in the Gaza or in the areas of war, like my heart does go out for you. I deal with personal issues every day that to me are the biggest problems in the world. And sometimes it helps to just have a little empathy or sympathy from someone to help me get through a day. I couldn't even begin to fathom what it's like for either side over there to be going through what they're going through. So I think some empathy is in order. But in the same respect, you've got to take some extreme ownership of your situation, and you've got to break outside the normal areas or avenues of education. And and I'll leave it at that, So, my heart goes out to them. My heart goes out to everybody in that situation. And hopefully there will be a resolution. I do not think it'll be a peaceful one. There's never been a peaceful resolution to any type of conflict like this in the conflict of nations. It just doesn't happen. So hopefully whatever the resolution is that it is fast and swift and it is the least painful of the options. And hopefully we can see something by the end of this year turning around positive in that area. And of course, we'll hopefully see some positive things turn around in our country coming into the end of this year. So with that, thank you everybody for tuning into a live on this President's Day. We are in our first President's Day of the new presidency. It has been nothing short of interesting, and I think it's just going to get more interesting, and we will cover it from time to time. Like I said, RFK is a huge alliance to the health and holistic community. Those of you that know Aubrey Marcus and what he does, he's a big supporter of RFK, and he's been pushing him in the holistic community for years. So again, I wish everybody a happy and healthy holiday, and tune in again soon. I'm sure we'll have some more interesting conversations. And ladies and gentlemen, we are out.